My name is Janet, and at the age of 65, I learned that life is made of moments that we keep in our hearts, even when the soul feels cold. Have you ever wondered what happens when you give everything for someone, and, at the moment you least expect it, you realize that maybe it wasn't enough? It's that feeling that brought me here, remembering a Christmas in Boise that changed my view of love and family. I have spent decades dedicating my life to Emily, my daughter. Every smile of hers, every achievement, every night I exchanged my sleep for her care, was engraved in my memory. Even far away, between trips and commitments with my work as a taekwondo coach in Seattle, I kept the call constant. Phone calls, messages, small surprises sent by mail. I always wanted her to know that I was there, even when I couldn't be physically. In this video, I'm going to recount the moment I found Emily shivering in the cold of Christmas Eve, while my son-in-law's family laughed by the fireplace, not noticing her suffering. You will understand every detail of what I felt, what I observed, and the silent decision I made to protect my daughter. Prepare to feel the same pain, but also the strength that can be born from true love. Believe me, a mother's courage can change everything. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know one thing. There are times in life when pain mixes with surprise in ways you never forget, and this is one of those moments for me. That Christmas Eve, I arrived in Boise unannounced, my heart beating faster with each mile traveled, feeling like something was wrong, even though I didn't know exactly what. Messages from Emily with no response, the silence of the phone, small signs that I couldn't ignore. Everything alerted me that my daughter could be alone and suffering, and something told me that what I would find would forever change our story. Before telling you, I would like to ask that if you have ever felt the anguish of deeply worrying about someone you love, or if you have ever had to silently fight for justice in your heart, support this video with a like or subscribe to the channel. It is not just a gesture. It is as if we are sharing an intimate moment, like one hand outstretched to comfort another, so that I can share with you every detail of this painful story, and so that you know that you are not alone in your own pain and memories. I arrived in Boise as night was falling, and the cold air cut my face as if to remind me that I was not just facing the snow, but something that weighed down inside me. The streets were decorated with Christmas lights, trees decorated on the sidewalks, houses with garlands and music that seeped through the cold air. But when I looked at Emily's house, I felt an immediate tightness in my chest. There were no signs of welcoming, no extra glow that indicated someone was waiting for us, no trace of the warmth I remembered from our Christmas Eve together. The footprints in the snow at the entrance seemed to have been ignored, as if no one cared to clear the way to the door. The Christmas lights flashed irregularly, some off, others burned, leaving the facade with an air of abandonment. The silence was unsettling. I remembered so many Christmases past, when I prepared every detail, every cookie, every bow on the tree, and Emily's joy lit up everything around me. That memory made my heart tighten, and for a moment, I questioned if I had done something wrong, if somehow my physical absence in the last few months had generated enough distance for her to feel alone. I tried to rationalize. I thought that maybe Emily was busy decorating the tree or cooking supper, but the feeling that something was wrong didn't leave me at peace. With each second, the restlessness grew, and I found myself staring out every window, looking for signs of life, any shadow or movement that told me my daughter was okay. I walked slowly down the snow-covered path, my boots sinking into the thin, damp layer that was accumulating, leaving a trail that would soon be blown away by the wind. Each step seemed to echo my anxiety, and my heart hammered in my chest, mixing memories of protection with the fear of encountering the cruel reality that my instinct already sensed. I knew Emily trusted me, but adulthood sometimes distances us from the people we love most, and the doubt about how her daughter was being treated eroded me. That's when I noticed something that made me stop abruptly. The balcony was dark, without light, and there was no movement at all, no sound of familiar laughter or soft music that normally echoed through the house at this time of year. A twinge of fear ran through my body, and for a few seconds I stood still, trying to understand if my eyes were deceiving me, if the imagination was painting a darker picture than it really was. But no, the scenario remained the same, silent, cold, too strange to be just carelessness. As I watched, my mind went back to the unanswered messages, the phone calls that hit the void. I tried to convince myself that Emily had left the phone in another room, That adulthood sometimes gets us too absorbed, but something inside me said that what I felt wasn't an exaggeration. A mother's intuition does not fail, and my heart was right to worry. The cold seemed to intensify, mixing with the feeling of alertness, and I realized that I couldn't ignore the signs. Every detail ignored in that house, every light turned off, every silence, added up to a deep feeling that my daughter was not only busy, but vulnerable. It seemed like time slowed down as I approached the door. Every step I took in the snow-covered garden seemed to amplify my own nervousness. The image of the past, Christmases filled with laughter, aromas of freshly baked cookies, warm hugs, contrasted painfully with the cold, silent scene that awaited me now. Nostalgia mingled with fear, and a silent anxiety tightened in my chest as if it were being compressed into every memory and every doubt. In that moment, I remembered all the times I felt helpless in the face of the difficulties Emily faced, and the pain of realizing that perhaps she was suffering without my knowledge grew inside me like a silent fire. I felt the need to be close to her, to protect, but at the same time I understood that every wrong step could be a mistake that was emotionally costly. And then, for a moment, I sat on the small balcony stairs, taking a deep breath, trying to calm my heart, reflecting on the fragility of life and care that, sometimes, even with all dedication, cannot prevent things from escaping our control. If you've ever felt that pang of fear when you realize that someone you love may be suffering without you knowing it, you might understand what I felt. It is as if a part of our heart is outside of us, vulnerable, exposed to the world and the unknown. I would like to know, who out there has ever felt this mixture of worry and helplessness? Write in the comments, I believe, I've lived it, or what a strength, and let's recognize together that this feeling is universal, that no one needs to carry this weight alone. I took a deep breath and stood up, feeling the cold snow on my feet, the breath visible in the icy air, and headed towards the door, trying to maintain the outside calm while every muscle in my body was tense with anticipation. I knew that what I would find there could change everything, and the feeling that the next moment would define the course of that night took root in every fiber of my being. A dark hunch told me that something was about to happen, something that would require from me all the strength accumulated over years of life and unconditional love. I didn't yet know what I would find, but something inside me screamed that the truth was just ahead, ready to reveal itself in a way I would never forget. I approached the window carefully, trying to see what was happening inside Emily's house, and what I saw chilled me more than the snow beneath my feet. The Whitlock family were gathered in the living room, around the fireplace, all with glasses of wine in hand, laughing loudly, toasting as if they were on a stage of joy and warmth. But something was terribly wrong. Emily wasn't there, not even a trace of her presence. The table, impeccably set, with a bright red tablecloth, steaming plates, and a perfect Christmas decoration, seemed like a scenario that completely ignored the absence of her daughter. Every gesture, every smile that I observed through the glass, carried a cruel lightness, an indifference that squeezed my heart. It was as if that family was celebrating something at Emily's expense, and the emptiness left by her made the environment even heavier and quieter in my chest. My breath was held for a few seconds, and I felt a wave of indignation grow, mixed with the surprise and incredulity of a mother who has always dedicated herself body and soul to her daughter. I saw her son-in-law, Ryan, raising his glass confidently, Evelyn laughing with a forced smile, Abigail entertaining the children, and no one seemed to realize that a piece of the family, my daughter, was completely excluded from that moment. My heart ached not only for the neglect, but for the certainty that this was a conscious indifference, a clear emotional betrayal that I could not ignore. Every detail I observed, from the lack of concern about keeping the porch door open for fresh air, to the twinkle in the Whitlock's eyes that didn't include Emily, served as silent proof that my daughter wasn't valued, that her presence had been intentionally ignored. I felt a mixture of pent-up anger and deep sadness, remembering all the sacrifices I had made, all the years I had tried to make sure Emily had the best, that there was never a lack of love or care, and now I saw that all my dedication could be devalued in such a cruel way. It was at that moment that I realized that that Christmas would not be just another commemorative date. It would be the starting point of an emotional and moral conflict that I could never leave unanswered. The feeling of injustice enveloped me completely, every muscle of the body tense, as if my own heart was preparing to react to what it saw. But still, There was a need to observe more, to understand how far the negligence and contempt could go inside that house. My mind was spinning, trying to look for explanations, trying to rationalize what I saw, but the reality was clear. Emily was being pushed aside, ignored, as if she didn't deserve the slightest bit of care or attention, while the family rejoiced in her comfort and lust. A twinge of desperation ran through me, mixed with a growing determination, as if a spark had been lit inside me, signaling that this would not just be an ordinary Christmas, but the moment when I would have to decide how to protect my daughter, in a way I never imagined necessary. And then, as I looked back at that scene, I felt that something much deeper was about to unfold, something that would forever change the way I would see my daughter, my family, and even the very meaning of Christmas. I didn't know yet how it would happen, but a certainty burned inside me. I needed to act, and what was about to unfold would be much more intense than anything I could have anticipated. What exactly would I find when I crossed that door? The answer was there, waiting to be revealed, and I knew that my heart would never be the same after that moment. I stepped out of the snow-covered path, and as I turned the last corner of the porch, I saw Emily sitting in an old wooden chair, shivering like a leaf at the mercy of the biting wind. She wore only a thin blouse, and the cold seemed to run through every strand of fabric, clinging to her skin as if to steal the warmth from inside her. Her hair was clinging to her forehead, damp from the melting snow, and her trembling chin betrayed not only the cold, but the sense of abandonment that enveloped her. My heart tightened immediately, and a quiet rage began to grow inside me. Inside, I screamed, but outside I needed to stay calm so that she felt some security. It was at that moment that I realized that the laughter coming from inside the house was not just music or joy. It was masked mockery, contemptuous comments that floated through the air, as clear as if they had been said right next to me. The Whitlock family didn't just ignore Emily. They devalued it, diminished it, as if its presence had no importance at all. Every laugh, every clink of glasses, every look exchanged between them reinforced the injustice she was experiencing, and I felt my blood boil with indignation and shock. I held my breath for a moment, trying to absorb the whole scene, and then approached slowly, not wanting to scare her, but unable to hide the urgency that drove me. Emily looked up, and as our eyes met, I saw a mixture of relief and shame in her red eyes, a silent plea for protection that pierced me like a blade. "Emily," I murmured, my voice breaking for the first time as I knelt beside her. "I'm here, my dear, no longer alone." His thin hands grabbed my jacket tightly, as if trying to anchor himself to me, and I felt every tremor of his body, every sob that hid at the tip of his lips. The scene was too painful, a concrete injustice that showed me that I could not simply observe or wait. As I held her, the memory of all the Christmases we spent together flooded me. I remembered the nights when I wrapped her in warm blankets, the stories I told to make her laugh, the recipes we prepared side by side. Everything I had done had always been out of love, and now I saw that this love had been ignored and disrespected, used as if it were something natural, but without recognition. The sadness was overwhelming, but I did not allow despair to overwhelm me. I needed to stand firm, to be the refuge that Emily couldn't find inside that house. It was at that moment, feeling his body trembling in my arms, that I understood the extent of what was happening. Every laugh that came from within, every wry comment, every gesture of contempt, wasn't just an isolated act. It was a pattern of deliberate cruelty, and Emily was at the center of it, completely unprotected. My indignation turned into a quiet force, a determination I had not yet fully explored. I knew I couldn't stand still, but I also needed to think clearly, so as not to let anger blind my judgment. As I held Emily warm in my arms, an idea began to take shape in my mind. I needed to document everything, every insult, every gesture, every sign of contempt. But most of all, he needed Emily to know that she wasn't alone, that someone was there to protect her, no matter what happened inside that house. The sense of injustice was so intense that it seemed to fill the surrounding air, making every second harder to bear, and I realized that something had to be done immediately. I stopped for a moment, feeling the cold penetrate my bones, and I thought of all the mothers who have gone through something similar. That mixture of unconditional love, powerlessness in the face of the cruelty of others, and urgency to protect their children. If you've ever felt that, If you've ever held someone in your arms feeling like the whole world was against you, maybe you'll understand what I felt at that moment. If you identify yourself, write in the comments, "I believe," "It touched me," or "I've lived it." Knowing that other people share this feeling gives me the strength to continue. And then, as Emily snuggled closer to me, trying to warm up, I heard the laughter of the room again, loud and numb, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I knew that what I was about to discover would test all the limits of my patience and strength. A strong presentiment told me that the reality that awaited us inside that house would be even more painful and surprising than I could imagine. My daughter was vulnerable, and every second she spent outside was a reminder that something needed to change. Something profound. One that would require all the courage I had built up in 65 years of life. What exactly would we find when I decided to face that door and the cold eyes of the Whitlock family? Little could I imagine, but something told me that the truth that awaited us was about to reveal itself in a way that would change everything. I held Emily in my arms, feeling every tremor of her body against mine, trying to convey some of the warmth she had lost in that biting cold. The snow stuck to my jacket, and the icy wind beat us, but nothing seemed as painful as seeing my daughter vulnerable, almost invisible to the eyes of those who were supposed to take care of her. I felt a mixture of despair and pent-up anger. Years of sacrifices, sleepless nights, silent efforts to ensure their happiness. Everything seemed to dissolve in the face of the Whitlock family's indifference. I watched, on the other side of the glass door, the glow of the fireplace lights reflecting off their faces, the loud and carefree laughter, and a twinge of incredulity crossed me. How could anyone feel so comfortable while a nearby human being suffered outside? I hugged Emily tighter, mumbling soft words, trying to show that she still had someone to feel safe for. "I'm here, my dear. No one will hurt you while I'm around," he said, feeling her breathing calm, even if slightly. I wanted her to understand that even though the world seemed cold and unfair, there was a firm foothold, someone who wouldn't abandon her. My every gesture was charged with love, but also with a silent anger against those who allowed this to happen. As I held her, I remembered every little moment of her life. The first time she fell off her bike, the nights she cried with a fever, every wound I treated without complaint, every smile I strove to keep alive. Now seeing her there, huddled up, feeling the cold to the bone, I realized that this scene was the manifestation of everything that should not have happened, but that unfortunately had become real. A deep sadness was mixed with anger, and I knew I couldn't just accept the situation. It was a low point, a moment when a mother's heart almost shattered, but she still found the strength to stand firm. Meanwhile, the icy wind surrounded us, and the feeling of helplessness pressed down on me. I wanted to scream for everyone inside that house to see, feel the pain they were causing, but I kept my voice soft so as not to scare Emily. I needed to be her rock, the safe haven that she didn't have at that moment. Every beat of my heart reminded me that despite the physical and emotional distance that adulthood had created, I could still act, I could still protect, I could still fight. If you're listening to me, do you know what it's like to look at someone you love and realize that the world around you seems to ignore your pain? I'm here opening my heart, telling my story. If you're listening, leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel because I still have a lot of things saved to tell you. It's as if we were sharing an intimate moment, and each gesture of support is a way of saying that you understand, that you feel together with me, that you recognize that sometimes life puts us face to face with situations that test everything we believe to be right and fair. As I pressed Emily against me, I felt a force emerge from where I least expected it. Anger turned into determination, despair into focus. Every second I spent outside strengthened the certainty that I could not retreat, that I needed to act decisively, with intelligence and patience, to correct the injustice that was before my eyes. This was not just a cold Christmas night. It was the beginning of a silent battle that would require all my courage and life experience. And as I looked at the house, the lights, and the fireplace that burned happily inside, I felt that the truth about what was happening to Emily was about to reveal itself in a way that would change everything. Something told me that injustice, no matter how silent and veiled, could not go unpunished, and that what I would encounter as I walked through that door would be only the beginning of a series of revelations that would test not only my patience, but also the strength of our connection as mother and daughter. What exactly awaited us inside that house? And how could I protect Emily in the face of the indifference and cruelty that seemed so present? The answer was right there, and I felt that this moment would forever change our Christmas and our lives. As I stood on the porch, holding Emily close to me, I clearly realized that what we were experiencing was not an accident or carelessness. It was deliberate. Every laugh that echoed from the living room, every subtle or explicit comment about her failures, about the miscarriages she had suffered, about supposed laziness and disability, was not just casual cruelty. It was a systematic pattern of humiliation. I felt a different cold than the one the wind brought. It was the weight of injustice, the awareness that Emily was being manipulated and belittled by those who were supposed to protect her. Every gesture, every look exchanged between Ryan, Evelyn, and Abigail, every laugh that seemed rehearsed, showed me that their contempt was calculated, a way to undermine their confidence and dignity. My mind began to mentally register every detail as silent evidence, every word proof that this was emotional abuse, even though no formal document could capture the full cruelty of the situation. I remembered all the moments when Emily called me crying, the nights she spent alone, the despair she felt when she lost a child. Everything now made sense in the face of that picture, and I felt the anger mixed with sadness grow inside me, turning into a silent determination. I knew I needed to act, that every second of waiting could mean more pain for my daughter. The injustice was evident, clear and painful, and I understood that I could no longer just be an observer. My every thought revolved around Emily's protection, how to turn that indignation into action without losing my temper, without letting anger destroy me inside. I felt that the time to act was coming, that the truth about her suffering needed to be confronted and acknowledged. And as I looked at her, in my arms, still cowering and trembling, I couldn't help but think, how much longer could this family manipulate and humiliate someone we love so much? Something told me that the next step would not just be to confront injustice. It would be a test of endurance, courage, and motherly love that would define not only that Christmas, but all of Emily's emotional security. What exactly would I discover if I entered that house now? And how would I be able to protect my daughter from such deliberate cruelty? The answer was there, waiting for us, and I knew that every move going forward could change everything. As I held Emily in my arms, the cold of the balcony seemed to disappear in the face of the warmth of the memories that invaded my mind. I remembered when she was just a little girl, too small to face the world alone, and I would spend nights awake next to her, cradling her when she cried, wiping away her tears, holding her fever in trembling hands. Every sacrifice I made, every penny saved to ensure she had a comfortable childhood, seemed now to be remembered cruelly by those who judged her life. I remembered the mornings when she woke up before the sun came up, preparing her breakfast and making sure I had everything she needed to go to school, the quiet encouragement in her studies, and the small daily victories, always trying to teach her that she deserved love, respect, and dignity. As he watched the darkness from the balcony, the contrast between these memories and the cold indifference of the Whitlock family became painfully clear. Everything I had done, all care, seemed ignored, and it filled me with a silent anger, mixed with a deep sadness. But at the same time, each memory strengthened my heart. Every sacrifice had not been in vain, and it was this silent force that now guided my steps. I knew, somewhere inside me, that the real battle was yet to come, and that the courage to protect my daughter would require more than words. It would require action, steadfastness, and strategy. I paused for a moment, looking at Emily, and felt a surge of tenderness mixed with an unwavering determination. My daughter had been humiliated, but she would not be broken. If you're listening to me now, I want you to know, I thought, as if speaking straight to the heart of those who listen to me, the story I'm going to tell you will still surprise you, because what's about to happen will change everything for me and my daughter. I felt that this was the time to internalize all the pain of the past and transform it into strength for the present. As I squeezed Emily closer to me, the memories continued to flow, reminding me of all the times she reached out to me in moments of fear and confusion, and how I tried to be the constant presence that the cruel world sometimes denied. Every tear I wiped away, every quiet consolation, every word of encouragement I whispered at night, all of it was now part of an emotional arsenal that prepared me to face injustice head-on. The pain of the past and the injustice of the present mixed, creating a knot of feelings that only a mother could fully understand. And there, in that instant, as I watched the silent house and the distant laughter coming from within, I felt that something was going to unfold in a way that was even more shocking than anything I had ever imagined. I could feel the tension in the air, the feeling that every moment I spent outside brought us closer to the truth that needed to be confronted. My mind was preparing for what I knew could not be ignored. I realized that the strength we accumulate with time and experience is not only measured by victories, but by the courage to face moments when all seems lost. And as the snow continued to fall, covering our shoes and warming my thoughts with the silence of the night, I felt that something very important was about to reveal itself. Something that would make all the pain, all the injustice, every tear Emily shed, finally worth it. I still didn't know how it would all happen, but inside me the certainty grew that the story I was living was about to reach a decisive point, and that, somehow, truth and justice would begin to emerge from that chaos. What exactly awaited us inside that house, and would it be enough to show those who tried to crush my daughter that they could not go unpunished? Every step I would still have to take seemed to carry the weight of years of care, love, and sacrifice, and at the same time, the promise that the upheaval we were about to experience would change everything forever. I could feel, with every fiber of my being, that the revelation that awaited us would not only show their cruelty, but also the quiet, unwavering power of a mother who would never abandon her daughter. I sat next to the makeshift bed in the small apartment I had temporarily rented to Emily, watching her sleep soundly, but still with her face scarred by the fatigue and tension of the night before. Her every breath was a silent reminder of what she had been through, and I felt my chest tighten, as if each beat carried the pain of months, maybe years, of neglect and disrespect. The silence of the apartment was almost deafening. There were no fake laughs. There were no cruel comments. Just the sound of her breathing and my racing heart trying to absorb everything we had experienced. As I watched her, my mind went back to the night before. Every detail of the porch, every mischievous laugh, every look of contempt I had witnessed. The feeling of helplessness accompanied me, but at the same time it awakened something inside me, a silent strength, a determination that I could no longer let it go unanswered. It was as if the silence, the stillness of the moment, was teaching me to transform pain into strategy, to transform injustice into planned action. I sat closer to her, holding her cold hands in mine, and began to remember all the times life had tested us together. Every tear she shed, every sleepless night I shared trying to comfort her, every sacrifice I made so that she would have opportunities that I didn't have myself. All of this was accumulated inside me, ready to be used as fuel to face the cruelty we had witnessed. The loneliness of that moment, next to the daughter I loved so much, was not just sadness. It was quiet preparation. It was building a force that needed to emerge to protect the ones I loved most. And there, in the dark of the apartment, I realized that many of us, at some point in our lives, have felt this weight, the silent pain of seeing someone we love being mistreated, ignored, or diminished, while we can't intervene immediately. If you've been through this, you know the anguish that corrodes inside. If you feel this pain right now, share it in the comments. I know how it is. I understand you, or, it's true. Knowing that we are not alone in these feelings gives us a little relief, and at the same time, strengthens what we need to do next. As Emily slept, my thoughts went back to planning, every detail of what needed to be done, every step I could take to ensure she was never humiliated or ignored again. I mentally revisited every test, every memory, every unanswered phone call, every cruel gesture I witnessed. Everything turned into a quiet strategy, a plan that would require patience, intelligence, and precision. Anger, sadness, and indignation were no longer just feelings. They were tools that I needed to use wisely. The apartment was silent, but inside me, a silent storm was brewing. I knew that the battle would not be simple, that every move would need to be carefully calculated. Every detail of the night before, every expression of contempt I observed, every cruel comment, needed to be recorded in my memory and in my heart, so that justice could be done in the right way. And though I was exhausted, I felt an unprecedented clarity. The action we needed to take would not be impulsive, but elegant, powerful, and irrevocable. As I stood there, holding Emily and feeling her body finally relax into my arms, I realized that this painful silence, this loneliness that felt overwhelming, was actually the preparation for the strength we needed to muster. I was ready to take on the Whitlock family in ways they would never have imagined, and every quiet breath in the apartment was a reminder that patience and observation would now be our greatest weapons. But even with this determination, I couldn't help but feel the anticipation of what was to come. Something told me that the next step would reveal even more cruelty, more contempt, and more secrets that would need to be confronted. Every detail I had stored in my memory began to form a complete picture of injustice, and I knew that it would soon be time to act. I could feel, with every fiber of my being, that what was about to happen would change everything, not just for Emily and me, but for everyone who had hidden behind laughter and the semblance of normalcy. What exactly would we be about to discover? What secrets were still hidden behind that cruel Christmas? And how could I use all the pain, all the silence, and all the outrage we carried to finally restore justice and protect my daughter? I knew that the answer was coming, and that every decision going forward would define not only the immediate outcome, but Emily's future, and the way she would see her own life from then on. I held Emily in my arms for a few more minutes, feeling that every second that passed strengthened my resolve. I couldn't allow her to continue to be mistreated, ignored, and humiliated. The anger and pain I felt turned to clarity, and for the first time I realized that the only way to protect my daughter was to act decisively. I needed allies, trusted people who could understand the gravity of the situation and help us confront the Whitlock family safely and effectively. I immediately thought of Jake, my former student, now a police officer, who had always shown integrity and courage, someone I knew would be willing to support us without hesitation. As I prepared my mind for action, I began to mentally organize all the evidence I could use to demonstrate the contempt and psychological abuse Emily suffered: unanswered messages, old notes, medical and financial records, every detail that could show that the family's cruelty was not occasional, but systematic. I went through papers, organized notes and memories, trying to transform the pain into concrete evidence. Each item became more than a piece of paper. They were silent testimonies of years of suffering and neglect. I picked up the phone and called Jake, trying to stay calm while explaining the situation objectively. I felt my heart racing as I heard his voice, but also an immediate relief. He was ready to act, ready to witness and protect Emily in the right way. The call brought a sense of hope, and that finally, we would no longer be alone in the face of injustice. Feeling that we had a reliable ally was like turning on a light in the darkness of despair. I then contacted a trusted attorney, someone who knew my history and my integrity, someone who could guide us legally so that every step was safe and effective. I explained the events in detail, describing every moment of contempt, every veiled insult, and every action that left Emily vulnerable. The conversation gave me a sense of partial relief, as if the first wall of resistance was being torn down and that the coming battle could finally be met with strategy and planning. As I was organizing documents, messages, and medical records, I felt an intense mix of emotions: indignation, sadness, anger, but also an unprecedented clarity. I realized that I could not act on impulse. I needed to turn my fury into strategy, my pain into evidence, and my determination into concrete action. Each test was a small weapon, each detail an essential piece for justice, even if slow, to begin to take shape. I looked at Emily, still asleep on the makeshift couch, and felt a surge of responsibility and absolute love. She trusted me, and it was my duty to make sure she was never disrespected again. Every tear, every trembling, every lonely night she spent in the Whitlock house was a reminder that there was no more room for hesitation. The painful silence of hours ago had turned into a silent force, guiding my every decision, every step I would take from then on. As I mentally reviewed every detail, I realized that this turning point was crucial. Silence needed to be transformed into action, vulnerability into protection, and injustice into strategy. It was time to begin the construction of the poetic justice that would follow, to transform the pain into something that could finally correct what had been done to my daughter. I knew that every move needed to be calculated, every word measured, and that patience would now be just as important as determination. And as I was preparing everything, I felt like we were on the verge of something that would change everything. The first concrete response had already been taken. Reliable allies by our side, documented evidence, strategies being planned. But we still didn't know exactly how the Whitlock family would react, nor how far their cruelty would extend to our preparation. The anticipation grew like a tight knot in my chest, and I knew that the next step would be decisive for Emily's protection and for restoring the justice that seemed to have been forgotten that Christmas. What exactly awaited us when presenting this evidence? And how would the Whitlock family react when they realized that their contempt and cruelty could no longer go unpunished? I felt, in every fiber of my body, that the moment that would define the course of this story was coming, and that from then on, nothing would be the same as before. Every second of waiting seemed to carry the promise of revelations and confrontations that would test not only our patience, but also the emotional strength and courage I had accumulated throughout my life. As I sat next to Emily, still holding her cold hands, I felt something inside me transform. Up until that point, I was just a worried mother, trying to protect her daughter from a cruel and uncaring world. But in that moment, I realized that I needed to go further. I needed to become a strategist, an advocate, and guardian of the truth, someone capable of facing injustice with intelligence, patience, and firmness. Every tear of Emily's, every trembling of her body, every lost look she directed at me, served as fuel for my determination. I would no longer allow the cruelty, contempt, or indifference of the Whitlock family to define her life. I began to mentally organize all the steps I would need to follow. She needed to document every piece of evidence: unanswered messages, notes, medical records, small details that demonstrated the systematic humiliation Emily had been suffering. Every paper, every conversation, every gesture became a silent proof, a piece in a carefully constructed plan to expose the truth. And even in the face of anger and sadness, I found an unprecedented clarity. My indignation would not consume me if I transformed it into concrete and strategic action. As I thought about it, I felt again that mixture of fear and courage that accompanies important decisions. He knew it wouldn't be easy, that facing a powerful family like the Whitlocks would require more than determination. It would require care, patience, and support. But I also knew that Emily needed someone who wouldn't waver, someone who wouldn't back down, and I was ready to take on that responsibility. Every step I planned was not only for my daughter's justice, but also to restore the dignity that had been stolen from them. I remembered all the sacrifices I had made throughout my life to ensure that Emily had opportunities, that she would never lack love, guidance, or security. That memory mingled with anger and the desire for justice, creating a silent but powerful force. I knew that from that moment on, my mission would be to use every resource at my disposal, not impulsively, but in a calculated way, to protect my daughter and correct the injustice she had suffered. And as I mentally organized each step of the strategy, I realized that I wasn't alone. Jake, my former student and police officer, would be an essential ally, someone capable of offering us practical support and protection. My trusted lawyer would be the voice that would ensure that every piece of evidence was considered, that every detail of the injustice was recognized and confronted within the law. The combination of these forces, coupled with the determination that was now growing within me, was enough to give me confidence that we could take on the Whitlock family effectively and quietly. If this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, will it help me to carry it forward? Like and subscribe here to the channel. It makes more difference than you think. It is as if, by sharing our story, we are connecting hearts that understand the pain, the indignation, and the strength that is born from the unconditional love of a mother. As I looked at Emily, who was finally falling asleep with calmer breathing, I felt that the decision had been made. Nothing else would prevent her from being protected. Every detail I gathered, every memory I kept, every proof of contempt and cruelty became a step toward turning our outrage into silent justice. I would not only take care of her, I would fight, strategically, so that no one else could touch it or diminish its value. And then absolute clarity emerged. I needed to face the situation with intelligence and patience, exposing the truth without allowing anger to blind me. The justice I sought would not only be emotional, but also legal and moral. I would feel every step, observe every reaction, record every detail. It would be a slow, silent, and calculated process, but an effective one, a way to ensure that Emily would never again be humiliated or ignored. As the silence of the apartment enveloped us, I realized that the first big stage was about to begin. The indignation I felt on the balcony, the pent-up anger and the deep sadness, all of this now turned into focus and planning. I was ready to act, but not impulsively. Every move would be part of a larger design, a strategy built to ensure that the truth came out, that the injustice was corrected, and that Emily could finally feel safe and respectful. The feeling of silent power began to replace impotence. I could feel that every second of observation, every detail written down in my mind, every call to Jake and my lawyer was building something solid, a foundation of justice that would grow stronger every day. The decision to never back down, to transform pain into action, became my new role. Not only a mother, but a defender, strategist, and guardian of my daughter's dignity. And as I looked out at the night outside, illuminated by the few Christmas spotlights in the neighboring houses, I felt that the decisive moment was about to arrive. There was tension in the air, a foreboding that the truth would be confronted in a way the Whitlock family had never expected. Every second of silence, every meticulous preparation, every memory of sacrifice and love, everything lined up for what was to come. And I knew, with every fiber of my being, that when the time came to act, nothing could stop me. What exactly would we discover when we finally exposed the truth? And how would the Whitlock family react when they realized that their cruel and despicable actions could no longer go unpunished? Every detail of the plan, every piece of evidence accumulated, every silent ally would begin to move like pieces on a board that I now commanded. I could feel that the turning point was approaching, that the twist that would change everything was about to unfold, and that nothing would be the same after this confrontation. As I sat at the makeshift kitchen table, surrounded by piles of papers, old notes, and messages exchanged over the years, I felt that each piece of information was a step toward regaining control of the situation. I needed allies, trusted people who understood the gravity of what Emily had faced and who could help us act intelligently and effectively. I called local lawyers in Boise, people known for their integrity and expertise, explaining the situation in detail, patiently and carefully, so that every word was recorded as part of the preparation process. At the same time, I sought reliable accountants who could analyze every financial transaction, every money sent, every expense that showed how the Whitlock family had manipulated and used resources in a way that harmed Emily. As I reviewed each test, I felt a mixture of anger, sadness, and determination, and old messages, medical records, and accounts of psychological abuse intertwined, forming a painful but necessary timeline that showed the deliberate pattern of disrespect my daughter had suffered. Every detail added to the clarity of the injustice, and I realized that our strength came from the meticulous documentation of everything that happened. I knew that, with care and strategy, we could turn this pain into concrete evidence, capable of confronting any attempt to distort the facts. Between one call and another, I thought of witnesses who could reinforce our narrative, Emily's trusted people, friends, and former colleagues who could attest to her dedication, kindness, and efforts over the years. I remembered every gesture Emily made to keep her life and her family running, often at the expense of her own well-being, and how painfully that contrasted with the cruel treatment she received. As I thought about it, I felt that justice would not just be about money or rules, but about restoring her dignity, and my own as well. In the midst of this meticulous preparation, I couldn't help but reflect on the silent force that is born of indignation when someone we love is mistreated. Every paper I organized, every detail I reviewed, reminded me of the power a mother can have when she turns pain into action. And as I looked through the piles of documents, I felt that each effort was adding up to something greater, a quiet, powerful plan, capable of confronting an injustice that seemed insurmountable. Truth, I thought, has a force that no one can ignore when it is presented with clarity and courage. If you've ever felt like you had to fight for someone you love, or that you saw injustice and wanted to take action, you know the urgency and determination that comes in those moments. And I want you to feel part of that story, like we're together, united by this willingness to protect and right what's wrong. If this moment touches you, leave a comment with, "I understand," "I've been there," or "This is true." Every word of support strengthens not only history, but also the courage of those who face silent injustices every day. As I organized everything, every piece of evidence, every witness, every financial or emotional detail, I realized that our preparation was becoming more solid. I was no longer just the worried mother, but a strategist, capable of transforming indignation and pain into concrete action. Each planned step was a way to ensure that nothing Emily had suffered would be ignored, and that the truth would emerge clearly and unquestionably. I felt that every call, every meeting, every document revised, brought us closer to a turning point when injustice would finally be confronted. And as the night wore on, I felt a growing certainty. We were about to reach a point where all the preparation, every piece of evidence gathered, every witness who was willing to speak, would form a powerful whole capable of changing the course of that story. I could feel, deeply, that the strategy being built would not only reveal the cruelty of the Whitlock family, but also give Emily the protection and emotional justice she deserved. Every detail reviewed, every conversation made, every paper organized, was a silent step toward the truth that was about to come to light. What exactly would happen when all these pieces were aligned? And how would the Whitlock family react when they realized that their cruelty could no longer be hidden or ignored? I felt, deep in my heart, that we were approaching a moment of revelation that would change everything, and that every effort made up to that point would be rewarded in a way that no one could have anticipated. The tension was rising, the anticipation was intensifying, and I knew that the truth was about to manifest itself in a way that would forever transform Emily's life and mine. As I reviewed every message, every bank statement, and every note I had collected about the Whitlocks, I felt a wave of incredulity mixed with anger run through my body. The lies were evident, subtle in some cases, brazen in others. Ryan had manipulated information about Emily's work, downplayed her achievements, and painted her emotional pain as weakness or laziness. Every detail I encountered added to the clarity of the injustice my daughter had been facing, and I realized that all she had endured was not just neglect, but a systematic pattern of devaluation. As I flipped through old messages, I came across emails and notes that showed deliberate attempts to make Emily doubt herself, to question her own competence and worth. It was as if every gesture of kindness or effort of hers had been systematically undone by those who were supposed to support her. I felt my heart tighten, remembering all the times she had told me about those moments in silence, holding back tears and trying not to show weakness. It was impossible not to be indignant in the face of such meticulous, cold, and planned cruelty. Each discovery strengthened me, reminding me of why I had decided not to remain silent. The truth needed to emerge, and Emily needed to feel that she was not alone in this battle. As I rearranged the evidence and mentally recorded every detail, I realized that some memories were so powerful that they stayed with us forever, shaping how we perceive the world and prepare to face it. And for a moment, I allowed myself to pause, breathe, and reflect. Every gesture of affection, every tear shared, every difficulty overcome, all of them were treasures of memory that gave me strength. If you are watching me, I invite you to search your own chest of memories for something special, something that has marked your life or that shows the strength of those you love. Share in the comments if you've ever gone through something similar or if you know someone who has experienced something similar. These stories are important and connect us in unexpected ways. But there was no time to just reflect. Each new discovery I made about the Whitlock family's manipulations and lies increased my determination. I needed to turn this information into concrete action. Every detail of Emily's life, every psychological abuse recorded, every attempt to lower her self-esteem, all became part of a larger plan, a way to ensure that the truth was recognized and that justice was sought. The pain we felt did not have to be in vain. It could become the silent force that moves real change. As I rearranged the papers, my thoughts returned to the night I saw Emily on the porch, shivering in the cold. That image was etched in my mind as a constant reminder of the urgency of the situation. The indignation I felt at that moment, mixed with the deep love for my daughter, was now transformed into strategy, each decision made with care and precision. I knew that confrontation was yet to come, that the Whitlock family would not accept the truth without resistance, but I also knew that I would not back down. Each evidence, each potential witness, each detail recorded, strengthened the path he was tracing. And as I was organizing these additional discoveries, a sense of clarity emerged. The battle was not just against the Whitlocks, but against the idea that anyone could manipulate and humiliate my daughter with impunity. Every piece of evidence collected, every piece of evidence of lying or manipulation, was a silent weapon that would ensure that the truth emerged unquestioned. Anger turned into determination, despair into planning, and sadness into energy for the next stage of our struggle. In the midst of this reflection, I realized that what we were about to face would be unlike any previous challenge. It wasn't just about protecting Emily from insults or immediate scorn. It was about confronting a pattern of behavior, exposing a deep-rooted injustice, and ensuring that no one else could continue to act with impunity. Each discovery renewed my courage and focus, reminding me that the turning point was approaching, and that our detailed preparation would begin to make a concrete difference in Emily's life. What exactly would we be about to reveal when we confront all these lies and manipulations? How would the Whitlock family react to realizing that every act of cruelty they tried to hide was now documented and ready to be presented? I felt, deep in my heart, that the upheaval was about to happen, that every piece of evidence accumulated would become a crucial step toward justice, and that nothing would be the same after this moment. The silence and patience we had cultivated so far were beginning to bear fruit, preparing us for the confrontation that would define Emily's future, and the truth that needed to be acknowledged. I walked into the Whitlock living room with Emily in my arms, each step firm as if marking the beginning of a new era. The fireplace still crackled, illuminating the surprised faces of Ryan, Evelyn, and Abigail. They laughed smugly, as if nothing that happened mattered, but I kept my cool, taking a deep breath before speaking. "Not anymore," I said, my voice low but full of firmness. Every word was measured. Every syllable carried the strength of years of pain, sacrifice, and silent indignation. I looked at Ryan first, his eyes wide, revealing a hint of surprise. "I know everything," I continued, feeling the weight of every piece of evidence I had gathered in unseen hands. Every insult, every snub, every lie that tried to erase the truth about Emily. Evelyn raised an eyebrow, feigning disdain, but she couldn't hide her shock when she heard my statement. Abigail, on the other hand, swallowed, her lips quivering, trying to contain her anger and disbelief. I could feel the mood changing. Their arrogance began to falter in the face of the relentless calm I emanated. There were no screams, no gestures of uncontrollability, just a firm, determined presence and a clear intention. I would not allow them to continue to manipulate or humiliate my daughter. I placed Emily gently on the couch, adjusting her blanket, and returned my attention to the three of them. "You underestimated what a mother is capable of doing when she realizes that her daughter has been betrayed, manipulated, and belittled," I said, letting each word reach the tense silence of the room. I kept my eyes fixed on theirs, feeling that every detail of my strategic preparation, every piece of evidence arranged, every witness contacted, every financial and medical record, hung unseen over them, weighing on each one's conscience. "I've documented everything," I continued, the controlled calm now turning into authority. "There is no room for denial. There is no room for excuses. Every word of contempt, every act of manipulation, every attempt to diminish Emily is recorded and will be used to make the truth acknowledged." She could see Ryan's lips move, but not a word came out. Evelyn tried to interrupt with a gesture, but the steady gaze I gave her immediately silenced her. Abigail stepped back slightly, unable to maintain her arrogant posture in the face of the force that now filled the room. As I spoke, I felt a surge of energy rising inside me. It was the quiet strength of a mother who had waited patiently, who had observed, documented, and prepared, and who was now turning years of pain into tangible power. Every detail of humiliation Emily had suffered became visible to their eyes, not through explosive confrontations, but by the simple fact that I would not back down, that my dignity and emotional control made evident the weight of her guilt. "I didn't come here for arguments or attacks," he said, keeping his composure but firm. "I came to set clear limits. Emily will no longer be manipulated, humiliated, or ignored. Any attempt to continue with these attitudes will have consequences, legal and moral." As my words echoed, I realized that the emotional impact was devastating for them. The arrogance they had carried for so many years began to dissolve, replaced by a palpable tension, an awareness that the balance of power had shifted, quietly, but irrevocably. And in the midst of this tension, I couldn't help but reflect on the strength that years of preparation and quiet patience can generate. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every missed phone call, every tear shared, it all added up to this moment of absolute control and restored dignity. It is amazing how patience, when combined with preparation and love, can transform a situation that seemed hopeless into a powerful and unexpected turning point. As I stood, maintaining my posture and controlling my every gesture, I felt that the entire room had changed. The silence now spoke louder than any scream, louder than any accusation. Each of them understood, however wordlessly, that the woman before them was no longer the mother merely worried or distressed. I was now a strategic force, determined to protect my daughter from any injustice, ready to use every resource at my disposal to make the truth prevail. And as I looked at Ryan, Evelyn, and Abigail, I realized that this first confrontation wasn't just a moment of affirmation. It was the beginning of a reversal of power, a pivotal point at which outrage turned into action, and where each subsequent step would begin to draw the narrative of silent justice that would follow. I knew, with every fiber of my being, that the real battle was yet to come, but the impact of this moment would be felt for a long time to come, setting the stage for the ultimate transformation that Emily and I deserved. What exactly will happen when all the evidence is presented? And how will they react when they realize that there is no more room for manipulation or denial? I could feel, silently, that the real turning point was just beginning, and that the next step would reveal not only their cruelty, but also the ruthless strength of a mother who finally refuses to shut up. As I sat at the table, pen in hand and stacks of papers in front of me, I felt a clarity that had previously seemed impossible. Every call made, every document reviewed, every proof of contempt from the Whitlock family was now ready to sustain my ultimate decision, to sever all the financial and emotional ties that still bound us to that family. There would be no more room for manipulation, lies, or humiliation. I took out the addressed envelopes, each containing formal protective notices for Emily, detailing that any attempt at intimidation, control, or disrespect would be immediately reported to the appropriate authorities. I felt a strategic coolness, a calm that was not an absence of emotion, but rather absolute control over the moment, ensuring that justice began in an organized and irrevocable way. As I signed each roll, a sense of freedom began to emerge, a sense I hadn't felt in years. The remaining emotional attachment to the Whitlocks was being dissolved, replaced by a firm determination to protect my daughter and preserve our dignity. Emily, sitting next to me, looked at me with a mixture of admiration and hope. I could feel that every step I took not only ensured our safety, but also re-established his trust in the world and in me. It was as if every word written and every action taken was an invisible barrier against the cruelty that had befallen us, a shield that would finally allow us to breathe without fear. I decided at that time that any future contact with the Whitlocks would be strictly regulated, formal, and safe. No personal messages, no unexpected encounters or false excuses. All contact would be mediated, documented, and secured, ensuring that Emily was no longer vulnerable. Each measure taken reinforced my empowerment, consolidated the emotional freedom I was gaining, and showed Emily that, finally, injustice would no longer have power over our lives. I felt stronger than I had ever imagined, realizing that the silence and patience of years had been transformed into concrete action, capable of redefining our existence. As I reviewed the last details, I couldn't help but reflect on how liberating it is to take control of one's life, especially after so much suffering and manipulation. Every strategic step I took wasn't just about cutting ties. It was about rebuilding a life based on respect, love, and unconditional protection. Emily looked at me, her eyes still teary but with a renewed glow, and I felt a surge of emotion that reminded me that it had all been worth it. Every tear shed, every sleepless night, every feeling of helplessness became a foundation for our reconstruction. And as I put the last documents in the envelopes, I felt that something had irrevocably changed inside me. Strategic coldness was not callousness, but rather the purest form of protection. Every action taken had a clear purpose: to ensure that Emily could live without fear, with dignity restored, and that the Whitlock family's manipulation and contempt no longer had a place in our lives. I could finally breathe without feeling the constant weight of injustice. and it brought me a quiet strength that I had never felt before. What will happen when Whitlock realizes that there is no more room for his manipulations? How will they react when they see that all the doors have been closed and that our emotional freedom is now unshakable? I could feel, in every fiber of my body, that this official rupture would only be the beginning of a profound and irrevocable transformation. The battle is not over yet, but the first decisive step has been taken, and the sense of freedom, of control and quiet justice, was already enveloping us, preparing us for what was about to come. As I sat in the small living room of the apartment, watching Emily organize some things next to me, I heard the sound of messages coming in on my phone and in my email. It was the Whitlocks, trying again to manipulate, threaten, and control. Ryan, with his arrogant tone, seemed to believe that he could still bully a 65-year-old woman who had spent her entire life fighting for justice and discipline. Evelyn would send emails with subtle hints, trying to induce guilt or regret, and Abigail would make provocative comments, hoping that my patience and silence would be broken. But each attempt fell before the well-structured strategy we had created. Every piece of evidence, every witness prepared, every legal document, was an invisible shield that neutralized any onslaught of theirs. As I read his messages, I felt a mixture of anger, satisfaction, and a deep clarity. The Whitlock family believed they could continue to play their power and prestige against us, but I knew that now the tide had turned. Their desperation was palpable, even if they tried to hide it behind cold words and veiled threats. I could feel the loss of control growing in every miscalculated email and phone call, and it was impossible not to notice how powerless they became in the face of my strategic patience and quiet determination. Emily, next to me, could see my firm calm. She looked at me, and for a moment, I felt that all the tension of the past and present found a quiet relief in our shared gaze. "Mom, do you think they're going to give up?" she asked, her voice still trembling. I smiled, shaking his hand gently. "I don't know if they're going to give up, honey, but I know they have no more power over us. We are protected, and the truth is on our side." That moment made me reflect. Sometimes strength is not in the screams or impulsive responses, but in quiet steadfastness, meticulous preparation, and the unwavering conviction to protect those we love. And as I watched each failed attempt at intimidation, I realized that the real power lay in our ability to remain calm, to act with intelligence and strategy, and to turn their every action into a confirmation of the justice that was already beginning to manifest itself. Every message from them that arrived with disdain or arrogance was now met with absolute control. Nothing else would intimidate them. The fear of losing advantage, control, and influence left them vulnerable, while our resolve grew with each well-calculated step. There are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling, we help another heart to breathe. Enjoy this video and subscribe, and let's make this story reach those who need it. And it's true. By sharing every detail of our struggle, I feel like we not only strengthen our own position, but also inspire those who face silent injustices every day. There is something powerful in seeing the truth stand up, even in the face of those who think they are untouchable. As the night progressed, I noticed subtle changes in the posture of each of them. Ryan sent more hesitant messages, Evelyn tried to soften her words, and Abigail seemed frustrated, seeking support in something that no longer existed. The inversion of power was visible. What had previously strengthened them, status, manipulation, and control, now became irrelevant in the face of the firmness of those who had prepared, planned, and protected themselves with love and intelligence. Each attempt to exert pressure became evidence of our successful strategy, reinforcing that silent justice was beginning to prevail. As I watched Emily beside me, I felt a wave of relief mixed with anticipation. The Whitlocks' desperation showed us that the tide had turned, that the balance of power was finally tilting in our favor. But I knew that this was just the beginning. Every failure of theirs, every failed attempt, was not the end of the story. It was the harbinger of something greater, of an impending revelation that would show not only the truth, but also the scope of the moral justice we had begun to exercise. What will happen when they realize that the patience and strategy we use is not only a defense, but also a weapon? How will they react when they realize that there are no more loopholes for manipulation, that every move has been predicted and every detail recorded? I could feel, deeply, that the real turning point was yet to come, and that the next step would reveal not only the fragility of his arrogance, but also the quiet strength that resides in those who love unconditionally and act wisely. As Judgment Day finally arrived, I felt my heart beat with a mixture of anxiety and determination. The courthouse in Boise was packed, and the air carried an almost palpable tension. As I walked in with Emily next to me, I noticed the curious looks and expectations of everyone: lawyers, judges, members of the Whitlock family, and bystanders. Every step I took seemed to echo in the room, and I knew that every detail, every meticulous preparation, had led us to this decisive moment. Jake was present, his steady gaze conveying quiet confidence, ready to testify, and the lawyer I had hired prepared calmly, reviewing every document and piece of evidence we had gathered. When the judge opened the session, I felt a shiver run through my body. The Whitlock family was present, flaunting their usual arrogant posture, but there was an evident nervousness in their gestures. Ryan adjusted his tie, trying to hide his discomfort. Evelyn bit her lip, and Abigail exchanged uneasy glances with the family's lawyers. I took a deep breath, remembering all the days, nights, and efforts that had brought us there, and I realized that the real strength was not in the size of the room or the number of people, but in the clarity of the truth and the patience of the preparation. Our attorney began to present the evidence: bank statements, message logs, medical reports, and detailed testimony about Emily's suffering. Each document was a piece of a mosaic that revealed the manipulation and cruelty of the Whitlock family, and I could see the tension on their faces grow. Ryan tried to interrupt, his voice firm but trembling, accusing us of exaggeration and bad faith. But the judge, attentive and impartial, allowed every piece of evidence to be presented, recognizing the importance of a thorough analysis. When Jake stood up to witness, I felt a comforting warmth. He recounted with clarity and precision every step of the psychological abuse, the attempts at manipulation, and the actions he witnessed on Christmas Eve. His firm stance, combined with his integrity as a police officer and former student of mine, brought weight and credibility to the narrative. The impact was immediate. The room became silent, the air heavy with the reality that could no longer be denied or hidden. I took a deep breath, realizing that we were conducting the trial with elegance, with no need for shouting or aggressive confrontations, just the force of truth. In the middle of the presentation, I felt a wave of emotion. I remembered every night I comforted Emily on the phone, every tear shared, every moment I felt like my love was the only protection she had. And I thought intensely, justice is not always quick, but when built with patience and precision, it is inevitable. It is amazing how the truth, when presented with care, can become an almost tangible force, capable of exposing cruelties that once seemed invisible. This is one of the lessons I want everyone to feel. Strategic patience combined with genuine love can turn pain into justice. As the trial progressed, each testimony, each piece of evidence presented, increased the tension and brought us closer to climax. The Whitlock family reacted with subtle attempts to discredit, but I could feel, silently, that their confidence was waning with each argument presented. I kept my posture, watching Emily beside me, watching her gaze soften as she realized that her pain was being acknowledged. Feeling this, realizing that finally the truth was being heard, brought a silent strength that made my heart fill with gratitude and relief. Coming to the final stage, our lawyer summarized each point, showing the coherence of the evidence and the veracity of the witnesses. Every detail of Emily's suffering was there, documented and presented with elegance, without exaggeration or unnecessary dramatization. I realized that the power of the narrative was not in shouting or accusing, but in demonstrating, calmly and firmly, the reality of the facts. It was a silent justice, but devastating in its moral impact. As the judge took notes and carefully analyzed, I felt that the entire room was bound by respectful silence. The initial arrogance of the Whitlock family was replaced by tension and insecurity. The inversion of power, so carefully constructed by months of preparation, was now evident. It was no longer the family with dominating status and influence, but a mother with patience, strategy, and love, guiding the way to the truth. And in that moment, I realized something profound. The emotional justice we sought was not dependent solely on the formal verdict. The truth exposed, the conscience of each witness, and the Whitlock family's own perception were in themselves a victory. Every look of recognition, every gesture of relief from Emily, every feeling that we were finally not alone, was part of a quiet and powerful achievement. As we prepared to hear the final words, I felt the anticipation grow, and I thought to myself, this is the moment that changes everything. Now we will see if patience, care, and love can really overcome manipulation and cruelty. The room was filled with tension. Each breath seemed to weigh more than the last, and I could feel that the energy of the climax was about to explode, bringing with it not only the resolution of years of injustice, but also the restoration of Emily's dignity and my own. What will happen when the judge finally renders the decision? How will the Whitlock family react to acknowledging or being confronted with every piece of evidence that cannot be challenged? I could feel deep in my heart that the next moment would define not only the outcome of the trial, but the strength of a silent justice that turns pain into power, suffering into recognition, and patience into moral triumph. The tension was at its peak, and the upcoming revelation promised to change everything, leaving everyone in the room, and us, forever, scarred by this moment of emotional and strategic victory. As we left the courtroom, I felt a quiet calm that contrasted sharply with the agitation we left behind. The Whitlock family were haggard, their faces stiff, and lacking the arrogant glow they used to display. Ryan tried to disguise his discomfort, but the tension in his shoulders and the restless look gave away defeat. Evelyn remained silent, avoiding any eye contact, while Abigail made nervous gestures, as if seeking support in something that no longer existed. I noticed every detail with quiet attention, feeling a quiet satisfaction that needed no words or aggressive gestures. The consequences of their actions began to unfold rapidly. Comments and reports about the trial circulated around the city, and the public perception of his arrogant and manipulative posture began to unravel. Friends, neighbors, and acquaintances, once silent, now expressed embarrassment and disapproval. Every criticism, every look of reproach, was a confirmation of the poetic justice we were witnessing, silent and powerful, without our having to act in anger or violence. I realized that true power was not in physical confrontations, but in the moral and strategic strength we maintained. Emily, next to me, shook my hand with a mixture of relief and surprise. His still, teary eyes reflected the understanding that justice could, in fact, be achieved in an elegant and calculated way. She could finally feel the emotional freedom she had sought so much, and I felt my heart fill with gratitude for having been able to protect her and guide her to this moment of recognition. The feeling of accomplishment, of a silent but firm struggle, was deeply satisfying. As we walked through the lobby, I realized that we didn't need physical revenge. The mere fact that we had acted with intelligence, patience, and moral clarity had crumbled the prestige of the Whitlock family. They were socially isolated, their reputations compromised, and public perception now reflected the truth they had previously tried to hide. This quiet victory was more powerful than any direct confrontation could have been, and I knew that Emily, upon realizing this, would find the strength and security to rebuild her life with dignity. The psychological impact on the Whitlocks was evident. Each attempt to maintain control or manipulate the narrative failed in the face of the clarity of the facts presented. I watched from afar, feeling a quiet satisfaction that needed no outside demonstrations. The power we had gained was not physical, but moral, strategic, and profoundly transformative. Each gesture of embarrassment, each word of unspoken repentance, reinforced the poetic justice that was beginning to consolidate. As we returned to the car, I realized that this moment symbolized not only Emily's and my victory, but also a silent lesson for all who witnessed it. Truth, strategic patience, and moral firmness are more powerful weapons than any direct attack, and now I could clearly see the effect this had on those who had tried to diminish us. The sense of quiet, righteous dominance was almost palpable, filling the air with an energy that conveyed respect and admiration, even without words. And as I contemplated the future, I felt that the lesson was consolidated. Even in the face of the arrogance and cruelty of those who think they are invincible, truth and justice, when carefully cultivated, inevitably manifest themselves. Emily could now walk free, without fear, without imposed control. and I knew that we had quietly and strategically restored her dignity. But what will come next, when the outside world begins to react to the fall of this family? How will they cope with isolation, public shaming, and growing criticism? I could feel that even without lifting a finger, justice would continue to unfold, and that every look of reproach and every critical comment that arose would be another step toward consolidating the moral power we were now gaining. And it was only the beginning of a quiet transformation that promised not only to repair, but to strengthen our lives and our bonds in the face of a world that was finally beginning to recognize the truth. As I sat on the couch in our small apartment in Boise, smelling the hot chocolate I was making for Emily, I couldn't help but reflect on everything we had experienced. Every tear, every night of worry, every moment when I thought there would be no way out, now mingled with a deep sense of relief and gratitude. I remembered what it was like to hold my shivering daughter in the cold, the feeling of helplessness that consumed me as I watched the cruelty of the Whitlock family, and how every decision, every careful and silent step we took to protect them, had led us here. Pain hasn't completely disappeared, and it may never fully disappear, but the way we face it has turned sadness into strength, and fear into determination. I saw Emily smile shyly, holding the hot mug with her trembling but firm hands. She looked at me and said, in a soft voice still charged with emotion, "Mom, I feel like I can finally breathe." My heart tightened and, at the same time, was filled with a warmth that only unconditional love can provide. Every sacrifice I made, every moment of silence and patience, every phone call, every letter of support, and every strategic step to ensure our protection and justice were reflected in that look. She was beginning to recover, not only physically, but emotionally, feeling that she was safe and valued, just as she had always deserved. As I watched the dim light coming in through the curtains, I realized that I had learned something fundamental. Life does not always give us immediate justice, but it does give us the strength to seek it. I learned to wait patiently, to act smartly, and to protect those we love with quiet determination. I also learned that true power is not in shouting or confronting violence, but in carefully constructing every step, every test, every strategy that turns pain into victory. This journey was exhausting, but it taught me that dignity and love are greater than any injustice or cruelty. I thought about the days and nights spent reviewing documents, preparing strategies, calling lawyers, finding reliable witnesses, and I felt a quiet gratitude for having been able to turn my indignation into concrete action. It wasn't easy. Fear, anxiety, and anger often made me question whether it was worth it. But now, looking at Emily, I knew that every effort had been worth it. Her smile, still shy, was a silent confirmation that the emotional justice we sought was coming true. In the midst of this reflection, I realized how much we have grown together. Emily was regaining not only her self-esteem, but also her trust in the world and the people who truly care about her. I, on the other hand, felt empowered as a mother, as a woman, and as someone who learned to turn pain into action and powerlessness into strategy. Each emotional scar we carried was slowly transformed into a silent weapon of protection, love, and dignity. As I prepared dinner, I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in a long time. I remembered all the little joys we had shared before the turmoil: laughter during pie making, bedtime stories, the weekend trips, the little gestures of affection. These moments, which seemed simple at first glance, were now pillars of strength and a reminder that life, even in the midst of injustice, still offers light and joy. Emily and I were rebuilding our world, brick by brick, with care and love, learning to cherish every little victory. And then I realized something important. The emotional freedom we gained didn't depend solely on the verdict, the Whitlock's defeat, or public validation. It was inside us, in the way we decided to react, in the love we shared, and in the courage to face pain without letting it consume us. True righteousness is not only external, but deeply internal, and we had found it. As we sat together, talking about old memories and laughing at little stories that reminded us of lighter days, I thought about how many mothers, daughters, and families face silent injustices on a daily basis. I wanted them to know that there is strength in patience, strategy, and love, and that dignity and truth, even if they take time, always find a way to emerge. And in that instant, I felt that the victory we achieved was greater than just resolving a conflict or exposing cruelty. It was the reconstruction of our lives, our confidence, and our emotional freedom. Emily was safe, valued, and beginning to open up to the world again, and I knew that from now on, our bond and strength would be unwavering. But still, I silently asked myself, even with all this victory, how many other stories like ours are still being lived in silence out there? How many people are waiting for someone to have the courage to act, to protect, to transform pain into justice? And I felt in my heart that Emily and mine's story could serve as a beacon, a testament that even in the face of the greatest cruelty, patience, love, and strategy can restore lives, dignity, and hope. What will happen now, as Emily continues her personal recovery and rebuilding? How will our future be shaped, knowing that we have finally won freedom and justice, but that life remains full of challenges and opportunities? I knew that the answer would still come in quiet but firm steps, guided by the love and determination that brought us here, and that every moment going forward would be a silent celebration of our strength and resilience. I was good. I was forgotten. But now, I am free. I felt every weight I had carried over so many years slowly dissipate, as if every tear shed, every moment of helplessness, and every silent sigh had finally found a space of justice and recognition. Emily, my daughter, began to smile again, genuinely, and I could see her blossom into emotional freedom, safe in the knowledge that she would no longer be held hostage to cruelty or contempt. Ryan, Evelyn, and Abigail were confronted with the consequence of their own choices, and the city of Boise gradually learned the truth about what happened that Christmas Eve. The heavy silence that once oppressed us has given way to a space of peace that seemed impossible to imagine in the darkest days. Today, my daughter and I walked together, with firm steps, building our life in the small apartment that is now our home, full of memories, laughter, and stories that belong to us, and that no one will be able to erase. The great lesson I bring from this journey is that the strength of love and patience, combined with the silent courage to face injustice, is capable of transforming suffering into power and fear into freedom. I learned that we don't need the approval of those who deny us or the recognition of those who try to diminish us. Our own dignity, our own resilience, and our ability to protect those we love are enough to restore lives and rebuild hearts. Every act of love, every silent effort, is a seed of justice that, with time and persistence, blossoms more intensely than any impulsive confrontation could produce. And I want to thank you, who have stayed with me to this point, listening to my story and allowing you to share every detail of our journey. Its support, even silent, is like a hug that warms and strengthens this channel. If you can, leave your like, subscribe, as if accepting an invitation to return to our next cafe, a moment of warmth and reflection. Comment from which city you are watching, so that we can feel this community united and present, sharing experiences and learnings. Don't forget to activate the bell so you don't miss it when the coffee is passed again and a new story comes up to warm your heart. Don't go away yet. Listen to the next true story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story, and come with me to continue discovering how time and quiet courage can transform lives in unexpected and profound ways.